Hallo und herzlich willkommen zurück zu einer weiteren Folge Chaos at Noah. Und ja, in der letzten Folge ist ja einiges passiert. Wir haben die Hintergrundgeschichte von Yua kennengelernt. Wir haben der siebte New-Gen-Mord ist passiert. Remy hat uns wieder mit nach Hause begleitet. Remy hat Taco wieder nach Hause begleitet. Und jetzt sind wir bei Ayase im Krankenhaus. Kishimoto-san, did your thermometer beep? Beep. A nurse wearing white scrubs opened the door into the room, then swiftly entered. Ayase slowly turned to look at the nurse's face, then took out the thermometer that had been resting under her arm. It was as if she had only just remembered its presence. The nurse took a look at the recorded temperature shown on its digital screen, and then took note of it on the clipboard she had brought with her.
37度1分とちょっと熱っぽいかしら。ズキズキする頭。
Ayase grimaced in pain once again.
あら、また頭痛？でもそれは薬の副作用よ。気にしなくてもそのうち良くなりますよ。
Having recorded her temperature, the nurse consoled Ayase with a kind smile. Her expression was so gentle, it was clear to all how she was able to put her patients at ease. Yeah. And yet, despite the nurse's attempts, Ayase simply pushed her hand against her forehead and she shook it back and forth. Ayase had been plagued by mild headaches ever since she had first been hospitalized. They were not especially painful, but they still left her with an uncomfortable feeling that refused to go away. Once it felt as if her brain itself was convulsing. It even reached the point where her ability to think was impaired. As well as this, her body would feel as heavy as lead. Ayase had experienced such symptoms in the past, namely when she had been institutionalized at Arcade Medical. Back then, her head had been constantly been split apart by painful headaches. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It deprived her of all sleep and emotional stability. Those were the memories she did not want to resurface. The past she had sealed away, the events of around 2 years ago. And yet her headache was causing them to flash back into her mind once more. Hey. Nächste Rückblende. Oh. In them, a dark room, a single window locked behind bars. Apart from the wall in which that window stood, the rest of the walls were covered with mirrors. Ayase had been placed in the center of the room, sat in a crude steel chair. She was wearing headgear with countless cables protruding from it. Her hands were tied to the back of the chair. Her head was locked in place with her chin tilted slightly upward. Not another soul was present in the room. Thus all that could be heard were the sound of Ayase's labored breathing and the metal groans of the chair she sat up on. Salvia tricked down from the corner of her mouth, accompanied by moans akin to those of a beast. If anyone were to hear them, they would never have been able to guess that they would come from a girl as young as her. She was being tortured, slow, methodically tortured. One that made very, very little sound. The method only involved one single thing, not even an action. A drop of water falling from above onto her forehead every 5 seconds, on the exact same spot. That was all it took. And it would continue unrelentingly for 2 full days. The result, Ayase could think of only the drop that would fall next. Her senses were sharpened to their limits, and each time the drop fell onto her throat, another hallucination would be born. One in which every nerve across her body was plucked out one by one. One in which the bones of her entire skeleton crumbled to dust. One in which her head was pierced by a long, sharp awl. one in which all liquids within her body, including her blood, froze to ice. One in which the skin lining her entire body slowly rotted away before eventually peeling off. Assailed without end by these sensations, Ayase could no longer maintain her sanity. Ja, also ich würde mal behaupten, das geht gegen die Genfer Menschenrechtskonvention. Returning to her senses, she breathed erratically as she tightly gripped the sheets lining in the bed. Her body trembled as those dark memories of hers resurfaced in her mind. The nurse that had been in her room just a moment ago was already gone. Dinner time had just arrived at the hospital, and the clamorous sounds that came from it resounded from down the hall. As I tried to recall the words the nurse had spoken to her right before leaving. Was the headache really just a side effect of the drug she was on, or had it been caused by her hitting her head, perhaps? Or perhaps it was just a hallucination brought forth by her past memories. She was unable to come to a decisive conclusion. Wiping away the sweat that ran down her forehead, Ayase called forth a smile laced with self-loathing.
構わないわ。今さ何をされたって。あれはあの神罰を耐え抜いたんだから。迷わない。私は。
Murmuring in perhaps delirium, Ayase soon became aware of a sound reverberating throughout the hall. The comforting sound of shoes stepping on the linoleum floor. It was certainly not being made by a nurse, and the sound of footsteps heading right for the room she was in. Someone knocked on her door, and she sealed her lips tight. Die Stimme kennen wir doch, super! That someone was but a single man. He had come bringing gifts, namely a large basket filled with all manner of fruits. She could recognize the man, which was far from a good sign. Thus she stared at him with a dubious glare. Sorry, musste kurz raus.
どうも。あ、別に怪しいもんじゃないっすよ。自分は
知ってるわ。
The man was a detective at the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department. He had once shadowed Ayase as she was originally a suspect for the New Gen case. The detective, relieved by her response, scratched his head as the manner was unendingly casual.
いやー、嬉しいっす。君みたいな美人に覚えててもらえて。記憶力いいんすね。
Ayase is pissed. The detective moved closer to her bed. As he briefly glanced at her D-set leaning against the window, it lay just outside her reach.
今日はお見舞いに来たんすよ。
そうは思えないわ。目的は
鋭いっすね。
The detective flinched very overtly, his reaction perhaps bordering on theatrical.
まあ、ちょっと綾瀬ちゃんに聞きたいことがあって。あ、これ。よかったら食べてほしいっす。
The detective smiled innocently, presented the basket he had brought with him, then placed it at Ayase's feet without waiting for approval.
うまいっすよ。あと、高かった。
Alter, ey. Du hast dir ein bisschen viel vom Bann abgeschaut, würde ich behaupten.
いらない。
まあ、そう言わず、せっかく買ってきたんで。後でお母さんが来た時にでも切ってもらって。あ、しまった。綾瀬ちゃんはもう何年も両親に会ってないんだったっすね。
Despite the detective's insensitive remark, Ayase had nothing in response to it. Her ties to her parents had been cut from a very young age. Her parents had a reputation to uphold, so a child that often caused problems like Ayase had been inconvenient to them, to say the least. Her only remaining contact with them was the wire transfer she received for her living expenses each month, though it could hardly be called that.
申し訳ないっす。
The detective apologized, bowing down hastily. Ayase had only just gotten over the shock caused by her flashback, so she was in no mood to speak with him. Nonetheless, she urged herself to talk all the same.
聞きたいことって何？アリバイ？
違うっすよ。それは前に散々聞いたし。もう綾瀬ちゃんの容疑は晴れたっす。君は白、真っ白。
目星がついたの？犯人の。
それは教えられないんすよ。捜査上の秘密っす。
匠。
秘密っす。
The detective smirked. He was attempting to laugh the question away, and yet something unrefined could be seen through the cracks of that smile.
しかし西条くんは不思議な少年っすね。彼を見ていると殺人の容疑者にはとても見えない。もしあれで本当に犯人だったとしたら、まさに人の皮をかぶった悪魔っす。
まだ容疑者なの？彼。
いや、そういうわけじゃないっすよ。
The detective casually united with a smile, putting Ayase's persistent question to rest.
ああ、今の話、誰にも言っちゃダメっすからね。情報漏洩すると上司に怒られるんすよ。まあ当然なんすけど。この前も先輩のとばっちりで怒られたばっかで。綾瀬ちゃんも一度会ってると思うんすけど、覚えてるかな。バンさんっていう髪がボサボサで無精ひげ生やしたおっさんでか。
Ayase did remember him. When she had been questioned, the older detective had been even more talkative than the younger one she was conversing with now. His way of speaking had been a lot more assertive as well.
あの人がすぐこのバカってどうなるんすよ。そのくせ自分は本来の捜査をせずに、なんだかわけのわからないことばっか調べてて。
Yep.
挙句の果てに自分まで無理やり付き合わされて、最近胃が痛いんすよね。いやまあ根はいい人っすし、勘が異常に鋭い人で、過去にも難事件をいくつか解決に導いたらしいんすけどね。
その話をするためここに来たの？
Ayase interrupted the man in his smile, quickly thought.
いや、申し訳ないっす。つい愚痴入っちゃったっすね。今の話は全面的に内緒にしてほしいっす。諏訪守、一生のお願いっすよ。
それで
一つ目は、なんであんなことを？
Despite his ambiguous phrasing, Ayase could tell that he was referring to a diving off the school
もう
rooftop.
何度も話したわ。他の刑事さんに。
邪神王グラジオールの復活を阻止するためですか？
死ぬつもりなんてなかった。魂を一つ上のステージに持っていこうとしただけよ。
例の若者の間で話題になった君の歌についても似たようなこと言ってたっすよね。
And that was the second question he had for her. Ayase let out a faint sigh.
ニュージェネのことを歌ったものなんかじゃないわ。あの詩はグラジオール期目視録詩編のインスピレーションを受けて作った第3章102節よ。
Das möchte ich kurz Tipp-List. Fictional, a high fantasy novel based on the Eastern European myth of Gladiol, the wicked-hearted king. Auch schade, das Ding ist fictional. Das Ding würde mich interessieren, nämlich. With the saga in its entirety being told over the course of 23 volumes, it depicts the battle between the 7 Black Knights in Gladiol. It was written by R.C.O. Ziegler from 1929 to 1951. The series has been translated into several languages, but it never gained widespread appeal due to its rather esoteric writing style. Ziegler's other works related to the Gladiol mythos include the Gladiol Book of Kings and Wicked Hearts, Apostolic Letter, and more. All of these works are collective referred to as the Gladiol Saga. Das wäre, also ehrlich, das klingt interessant. Das würde ich auch gerne da lesen.
世界邪神王グラジオールが現れようとしている。復活を阻止するには グラジオールが流した黒い血によって作られた7つの杭が必要。杭は剣へと形を変え、神罰を乗り越えた7人の黒騎士の手に渡る。目には目を、歯には歯を。邪神を背負いし人間だけが邪神王を滅ぼせるの。
なんか映画みたいっすね。そういう壮大な設定は好きっす。
As he glared at the detective in response to his comment.
設定じゃないわ。現実よ。
じゃあ最後の質問っす。
The detective casually brushed away Ayase's objection, though she was all too used to this form of dismissal by now. Not a single person she had told the story to thus far had believed it.
君や西条くんの他にも水明の生徒について何人か洗ったんすけどね。
The detective mumbled to himself as he folded his arms. This was very obviously another act of unfair tricks, and Ayase had no intention of commenting on it.
何？
すごくバカバカしい質問なんすけど、刑事が質問するようなことじゃないんすよね、本当は。子供じみてるっていうか。
そう、質問する気がないの。出てきて。頭は痛いの。
ああ、いや、実はね、バンさんが妙なことを言い出してるんですよ。君たちは魔法使いなんじゃないかって。
Upon hearing that the subject of that remark was Prue, Ayase raised her eyebrows in suspicion.
違いますよね。
使えるわ。
As she replied, Ayase's line of sight was directed not towards the man but toward her hand that lay atop her bedsheet.
綾瀬ちゃんって面白い子っすね。
でも、ニュージェネはグラジオールの騎士と無関係。
ああ、そうっすか。まあどうでもいいんすけどね。
The detective, completely disinterested in what Ayase had just said, brushed off her words once again and then began to stretch. The moment he did so, a digital sun suddenly cut through the silence of the room. The detective, surprised by this interruption, reached into the pocket of his suit and took out his cell phone. Ey, was ist das bitte für ein Klingelton? He turned his phone off with a grin, forcing the caller to hang up. He then turned to Ayase once more.
綾瀬ちゃんは映画見るっすか？スパークウォーズって知らない？
Spark Wars, that
ダ
was...
ーススパイダー伯爵のテーマなんす。今のメロディ。
Ayase had no interest in movies, nor anything of the sort. Having long since decided that she had no obligation to further entertain the detective's questions, he returned to gazing silently outside the window.
実は自分スパークウォーズオタクなんすよ。あ、興味ないっすか？そりゃ失礼したっす。じゃ、自分はこれで。
With that, the detective concluded the conversation with which he had no partner, and then left the hospital room. Ayase did not even turn around to watch him go. With the man gone, all that reflected in her eyes was the twilight sky slowly turning indigo. Ich wollte gerade sagen, ist das nicht... Das ist Taco mit seiner Delusion. Das kann nichts anderes sein. Oh, ist das geil. Er stared in the days at Sarah 10 as she moved around the monitor. The final episode of Bloodstone had aired deep into last night. The story was gradually getting more and more intense, and the episode that had received particularly high praise on that channel. This was the third time I had seen it, but none of it was really sticking with me. I checked the time and saw it was past 10 p.m. Remy had left around 8 p.m. While she had been here, she had encouraged my depressed self in many ways, and she had said so many nice things to me. Thanks to her being by my side, I had felt less lonely today than the entire week prior. That being said, Remy still wasn't taking the situation all that seriously. It felt almost like she was avoiding talking about Nugent entirely. Maybe she was just done with it, with me. Her friend had been hurt in the earthquake, and it sounded like she already had a lot on her plate with just that. She probably just didn't have any room left to bother with me and my problems. But the issue with that was, well, yes, I was probably way too paranoid. There was no doubt that this was a genuinely dangerous situation. I could be killed today, even. Shogun had been coming after me all this time, persistent. Didn't even begin to cover it. If I could just understand what he was doing or why he was doing it, then I could work out some countermeasures.
そういえば、あのおじさん、別れ際にこんなこと言ってたのら。中でも一番特別なのは、その目、誰の目を産み落とした少年。
Whose eyes are those eyes? You could hear those words all over Shibuya by now. On the net, it had become synonymous with the culprit. It was a phrase I had used pretty often for a really long time. It was without doubt a message from Shogun, who knew that. Either that, or an intentional way of provoking me. When I first started using that phrase, it felt like someone had taught it to me. I vaguely remembered the first time I'd used it. It was an essay I'd written back in elementary school. The title was that very same phrase, whose eyes are those eyes. I had almost completely forgotten what I had actually written in it. I wanted to check now. What had I written in that essay? It was probably stored at my parents' place, though I had a feeling that they might have thrown the old thing away by now. Then again, when it came to things that were pretty important to me as a kid, I did have a habit of storing them in a big empty candy tin I'd used to call my trailer box. The essay could potentially have been in there. What to do? Should I go to my parents? But I didn't want to show my face to Nanami. I wouldn't know what to say.
僕はどうしようもなくヘタレだ。
I sluggishly rose from my seat, then collapsed onto the sofa.
あなた、なんでここにいんの？これは違うんだからね。私は別にさ、立ち食いそばが好物なわけじゃないさ。何ニヤニヤしてんの？このボケナス。もう怒った。うなれ、侍コンデンサー。
Dying face up, I guess, at the ceiling while ignoring Sarah's protesting that dreary bare steel ceiling. Unlike my room at my parents' house, there wasn't a single growth in the ceiling that looked like a person's face. Suddenly, in the corner of my vision, I noticed a familiar tin sitting by the aero packages piled up on my loft bed.
あれって。
I hurriedly stood up and climbed the ladder to get a closer look. It was a reddish brown rectangular tin, about the size of a B5 piece of paper. The word shortbread was written on the lid in white letters. There was no mistaking it. It was my treasure box. Hattest du nicht gesagt, dass der bei deinen Eltern zu Hause ist? I must have brought it from my parents' place, though I definitely didn't remember doing so. Good job, me. Always thinking ahead. I quickly grabbed the tin and opened the lid. Inside were a few test answer sheets, essays, scraps of paper torn out from scratchbooks, and so on. It was mostly oil paper, but there were still a couple small objects in there. I took all the pages from the tin at once, then began flipping through them for my target. It didn't take long to find it. After all, it was at the very top. The essay paper had faded in color. The handwriting, not even a mother could call it good. Could this essay be hiding some kind of important secret, something Shogun was particularly exploiting? Something that had to do with the homeless man had referred to me as the most vessel? With a gulp, I began to read it one word at a time, being careful not to overlook anything. Whose eyes are those eyes? Nishijo Takumi, class 4-3. I dream a lot. In my dreams, Oda-mi visits me in a time machine. He doesn't look like me at all. His time machine has a lot of buttons. I think if you push one a shower or some shampoo or something comes out. I asked Oda-mi how it works, and he said you could go see dinosaurs, or even go back to when cavemen were around. He asked me what I'm bad at school, what I'm bad at in school, and I said I'm bad at math. He told me there was a switch that would make me really good at math. I tried to push it once, but he got mad. He said I had to work hard and get better by myself. That was the only time he got mad at me. After he stopped being mad, he was super nice, and so I was happy. He told me about the girl I was gonna marry. That's a secret. I asked him about God. He told me God is real. I think he's real too. My mom said God is always watching, and he will make you go to hell if you do bad things. So I can absolutely never do bad things. I have to be nice to my little sister too. Mom told me God doesn't watch you do bad things, but that it's a scary man instead. The scary man isn't the whose eyes are those eyes monster. He makes you go to hell if he sees you. God's eyes and whose eyes are those eyes are in the sky. The ceiling and the walls, and there's a lot of them in my school, and they're watching me no matter what. So I think I have to do a lot of good things like studying and other stuff. Because of that, it's embarrassing though, because they watch me even when I do things like go to the toilet or take a bath. Also, ever since I was little, I could close my eyes and dream sometimes even though I wasn't sleeping. It was like the inside of my head was like a video game or a manga. But when I do that, the whose eyes are those eyes monster comes out, so I don't want to do that. I asked my mom and she told me not to do it. But while I'm writing this essay, I asked Oda-mi in my dreams and wouldn't tell me more about the time machine, but he said I knew everything. He wouldn't tell me more stuff because I'm just a kid. So from now on, I want to do lots of good things so I can beat whose eyes are those eyes. The end.
なんだかよくわからないな。
This would have been around the time when I had first started feeling God's gaze. Maybe I was going through some sort of phase back then. Either way, trying to understand anything from this extremely cryptic essay was beyond impossible. It felt like it would be easier to decipher a bunch of hieroglyphs than it would be trying to figure out what the hell I'd been talking about. As I thought that, I noticed that something was scribbled on the back of the page. Come to think of it, hadn't I loved dawdling back then? Yeah, like in my social studies textbook, the pictures of historic figures would always have mustaches or sunglasses drawn on them, and my notebooks would always have flipbook animations drawn in the corner. Back then I had started enjoying drawing more and more, to the point where I had even gotten my parents to buy me a sketchbook. Also, to clarify it, it wasn't like my drawings were anything to write home about. Immersing myself in the story, I turned the essay over to check out what I had scribbled on it. It was an incomprehensible drawing. IR2. But while it was definitely incomprehensible, there was still something. familiar about it, something I'd seen recently.
IR2
Fun. Mhm. Diese Formel haben wir doch auch schon mal gesehen. Was it was a mathematical formula had some other kind of meaning or was just a meaningless string of numbers and letters. I had no idea. But Fun hoch 10 mal Intelligence hoch 40 gleich IR2. This formula, it was the exact same one Shogun had posted out of nowhere back when we had first come in contact with me in the chat room. Whose eyes are those eyes and IR2? Two key things that had come from the essay I'd written many years ago, things that even I myself had forgotten. And if Shogun knew them, that would mean that he would be reading my mind after all. Und ich würde sagen, an dem Punkt beende ich jetzt die Folge. Vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen und bis zum nächsten Mal. Ciao.